All right, everyone. I'm just here with Amaury Séchet discussing the BCH network upgrade. First off, I'd like to welcome you, Amaury, and thank you for taking time out of your day to speak with me about some of the specifics with the upcoming network upgrade on November 15th. So first off, I guess we begin with what is happening with Bitcoin Cash for anyone that hasn't been paying attention.
Quite a lot. Maybe it's right. It depends what people are interested in, but we're still building peer-to-peer digital cash. That's the main, the main goal of the project. So, to make that goal happen, there are a few properties that we keep improving on BCH, and those are making sure transactions are cheap, fast, reliable. So right now they are cheap and reliable, and pretty fast. They can settle in minutes. We want them to settle in seconds. So we have technology in the pipe that people have started working on to make that happen. And we want BCH to have hard money properties, right? That means that there is 25 million coin, and they're never gonna be more than that. But also, we need that people are able to predict into the future what BCH is gonna look like, so that they can trust that they leave their money in there and it's not gonna turn into something they don't expect while they're not looking at it. So that's what we're doing. More specifically, in November 15, there is a network upgrade, and the main change. Well, there are two changes. So one of them is difficulty adjustment. So the difficulty adjustment is going to be a bit better than it is now. It should give us more consistent block time. So right now there is a variance. On average, block times are 10 minutes, but sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. It's still going to be more or less, with 10 minutes on average, but it should be more consistent. So that's the first improvement. The second improvement is that we're introducing a self-funding mechanism for BCH infrastructure, and in that in that concept, so part of it is going to go to fund the infrastructure directly, the development, but we recognize that the success of that network is not going to be just infrastructure. Like, infrastructure is just one piece of it, and so for the rest of it, there is what we call the Global Network Council, which is effectively a council of people who either hold a lot of coins or who have mined a lot of blocks, and they will have to sign messages to prove that this is the case. And people who can prove that this is the case can send a representative to the Global Network Council, and the Global Network Council will be able to fund various projects. If those projects are companies and stuff like that, the Global Network Council is going to get equity in those companies, and so this is reinjected then in the Global Network Council itself. That should be, I think, very interesting for big player in the space. That's also, for me, very bullish on BCH. Every time this kind of news, even though we have not materialized them previously, every time this kind of news has been announced in the past, the reaction from the market has been fairly positive. There is some people within the BCH ecosystem that oppose those kind of change, but I think there is a bit of a self-selection bias here. I think a lot of that has to do with the people that don't support. The people that don't support have just been driven away more or less over the years. Like, I can think of, I can think actually of half the Have a Lab team. Like pretty much Gabriel Cardona and Tyler Smith and Don Monton, like all those guys, they used to be in the BCH space, and the lack of building something solid rather than going from one gimmick to the next has driven those people away.
So what do businesses need to do to continue to follow the BCH chain come November 15th?
So most businesses just need to run the Bitcoin ABC software version 0.22. We have we released 0.22.4 very recently. So there are like 4 versions you can pick from. Any version above 0.22 is good for the upgrade.
Okay.
And then, you know, like if they want the latest feature and everything, they can, you know, they can still upgrade more.
0.22 or later, and we're good.
Yeah, for miners, they need to make sure that their mining software is configured properly for the self-funding mechanism. There is the information in the RPC, you know, like the get block template RPC gives the information to what the node software needs to do. This is something that is fairly common. Zcash, for instance, has been doing something similar for a while. So people that are in the mining space should be aware of, you know, how to do that. And if they are not, they can feel free to reach out.
Are there any risks of running Bitcoin ABC instead of other node software?
I mean, no, not really. There is running other node software because right now there is no reorg protection or chain wipeout protection. So what does that mean? There are some node software that implements the same rule as Bitcoin ABC, except the self-funding mechanism. And so if someone decides to fork BCH and mine it without the self-funding, what's going to happen is that you're going to see a split. But because the rules except that are exactly the same, it's going to depend on how much hash rate there is on both chain. And if the chain with the self-funding mechanism has more hash, then the other chain is going to be wiped out, no matter, you know, no matter how long it is or how long this has been going. So you can see, you know, like hours, day, weeks, months of transactions being reverted in that case, which is extremely, I mean, like if you run a business, you really don't want that. So we are advising against doing that unless those alternative implementation implement something to protect against reorg and wipeout, which I kind of expect that they will at some point, but right now they don't. And so for as long as they don't, I would advise against running any of those.
You've just spoken about reorgs and a little bit about chain wipeout. Could you go into more detail on what could happen?
A chain wipeout is when you have a chain that is strictly more permissive than some alternative chain. So it, you know, for example, than the self-funding mechanism. Let's talk about block size. So let's say I have this node software that accepts blocks up to, you know, like 2 megabytes when the whole network accepts blocks just up to 1 megabyte. So my node software runs exactly the same rules as the other. It's just more permissive on one of them. It accepts up to 2 megabyte blocks instead of 1 megabyte. What's going to happen is that if someone starts mining blocks that are larger than 1 megabyte, my node is going to accept them, but the whole network as a whole is not going to accept them. And those blocks, you know, ultimately, as long as that chain is longer, then those blocks are going to live. But as soon as the 1 megabyte blockchain gets longer, all those blocks are gone. Right? Because now they are not the longest chain anymore, and the alternative chain is also valid as per my node. So my node is going to abandon all the block that is following and follow the other chain. And it doesn't matter how deep, you know, like how deep that chain is. So possibly there can be like, you know, day, weeks, months of transaction that get completely wiped out. Yeah. Okay. It's like as if they never happened.
What can businesses expect after the RFP is enabled in terms of roadmap development?
So we should, you know, expect that we move much faster on the roadmap. That's one thing. And there are, I think, a ton of features on that roadmap that business are going to like. I think the main one is basically instant transaction. That's, I mean, like, can you imagine if you pay something and within 3 seconds, it's like, you know, the payment is final. There is no chargeback possible. There is no nothing possible, no funny business. Or you can deposit your money on an exchange and, you know, like seconds after that, you can directly trade it because the exchange know that there are not going to be any reorg or anything. This is, I think, a feature that user first and foremost are going to like very much. And because users are going to like it very much, I think businesses operating on the chain are going to like it very much. It's good for them.
Offers finality.
Yeah. So I think this is the main one. If we look at, you know, the objective of the project, this is also the one that is most in line with that. The other stuff is that if they are big influential business, they are not going to have you know, a space where they can voice you know, what they want about the direction of the project in the Global Network Council. So I think that you know, that's interesting for big actors as well. Like big actors are going to be able to send a representative, or even smaller actors. This is something that people don't realize, but smaller actors can pool together to show that together they own as much stake as a big actor, and you know, send one representative for them. So those people are going to be able to, you know, let their interests be known and have a voice in the direction of the ecosystem.
I've heard from a number of sources that BCH won't be paying the full 8% of the Coinbase Rule. Can you explain the details around this?
Yeah. So effectively, what happens is that there are several chains that use the SHA-256 algorithm for proof of work. BCH is one of them, but there is also BTC and BSV and a few others. And what we see happening is that the difficulty on all those chains adjust, such as the profitability to mine each one of those chains is roughly similar, right? So suddenly, if the price of BCH goes up, for instance, there is more people that are going to come mine BCH because it's more profitable to mine BCH. But as doing so, the hash rate increase, the difficulty of BCH increase, up to the point where the profitability of mining BCH is equivalent to mining BTC, say. And at this point, the difficulty has completely adjusted, and no more people are coming onto the BCH chain. So we will see something similar happen here. Even though there are 8% of the coins that are mined that go to this self-funding mechanism, what we will see is that effectively the hash rate is going to drop by 8%. And some of that hash rate is going to go on BTC, some of that hash rate is going to go on BSV or whatever else. And the difficulty on BCH is going to go down, and so the profitability is going to adjust. And so based on current price ratio, this would be a change in profitability that is less than 0.2%. So effectively, like with variance and all of that, it's like effectively a rounding error.
What are your predictions? Will there be a split? Obviously, no one knows the answer to this, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on what they are. I mean, you wouldn't put this plan forward if you didn't have some backing from in the first place.
Yeah, so I think this is likely that there will be a split, because even if BCHN doesn't manage to get the majority hash, I fully expect them to, you know, add a checkpoint in there or something and create a split that way. I've been talking about a split since way before this whole thing has been going, and at the time everybody was like, "Oh, you're spreading FUD. There won't be a split. Nobody wants a split. Blah 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 blah." But to me, it's very clear that they're going to be split no matter what, and the reason is pretty much everything that is part of there is subject to creating controversy. So right now there is controversy around the self-funding mechanism, but before that there was controversy around difficulty adjustment, and before that, you know, there was like transaction ordering and the address format, and you're like, whatever. There is always the same group of people, or check data sig and all those stuff. There is always a group of people that have been very vocal against those stuff, no matter what it is, no matter how it is defined. And almost all of those stuff ended up being like huge success for BCH. I think the address format, for instance, we have report from the exchanges that it effectively like cut by an order of magnitude the kind of support tickets that they have related to BCH.
Stopping BTC transactions being confused with BCH transactions.
Yeah, because people don't confuse between BCH and BTC and PSV and all of that. So it just cut down the support around BCH dramatically. So it's good for them. Check Data Sig has enabled a ton of use case around Oracle and what's the name? Covenants. So covenants is like transaction where you constrain the way the fund can be spent. Check Data Sig has been, you know, instrumental in making all those technology happens. So all of that has been like, fairly big success, but every single time there's been a huge controversy around it. And I think this comes from the fact that because there is no self-funding mechanism within BCH, effectively the main currency most people are trading in when they develop stuff is attention. And effectively the easiest way to get attention is to create controversy. Controversy is always, like a very easy way to get attention. And it's the most, like cost effective, I'd say. You can get attention in other, doing other stuff, but it's usually way more work to make that happen. And so, creating controversy and getting attention that way is highly incentivized in the BCH ecosystem at the moment. And this is probably like the main feature of the self-funding mechanism that the self-funding mechanism can have. It's gonna change that incentive.
We essentially cut through all the drama and the shit that we don't need.
It's gonna cut through the drama, cut through the noise. Right now we have people. It's quite funny because you would have made a parody of that. I would have said, like it's a bit too much. But right now we have people that are actually clamoring that BCH has no roadmap and this is a good thing. So first and foremost, this is false. If you go to BitcoinCash.org/roadmap, you're going to see that BCH has a roadmap. But like where do you need to be mentally so that it sounds like a good idea to have no roadmap? It's like we have no idea where we are going, but we're going there. Like you can trust us. It's a horrible investment thesis. Like nobody is gonna put any money into some project that has no roadmap. That just doesn't make sense because you don't know what this project is gonna be in a year, in 2 years. And so how can you leave your money for a year or two in that project? It makes no sense. Plus, I mean, like if you don't set yourself to try to achieve something, you're never gonna achieve anything.
Yeah, instead of keeping an open roadmap, they want to just take bits that people develop and put it together, take a vote essentially, which is, you're just grabbing people off the street and they don't know what's good.
Yes, well, the problem with that, there are a few problems with that, but let's go over a few of them. Like first, the information and the sense, the taste of what is good and what is not evenly spread. And there is no incentive for it to be evenly spread. So there is a lot of discussion, for instance, about shareholder voting in companies and why effectively the C-level executive make most of the decision rather than the shareholders. But the reality is the shareholder don't have the same incentive as the C-level executive to know all the detail of everything. And most of the time they just don't want to, right? So they have a shareholder vote like once or twice a year. They make some important decision about the general direction where the company is going to go into. And then you got to trust the C-level executive to be able to implement that strategy and putting into place. It just wouldn't be efficient otherwise because you need some kind of driving, unifying vision about what you do. And if you ask 1,000 different people, they're just going to go tweak 1,000 different details in some way. And the whole project, if you take any single one of those decisions, they may sound reasonable, but then you take the project as a whole and there is no unifying factor and all kind of weird stuff everywhere. And you can see that, I'd say it's probably basically the main difference between Apple product and most of the competition. If you take a MacBook Pro or if you take a Dell XPS, in terms of hardware, they are fairly similar. They have like a Intel CPU and NVIDIA or AMD graphic cards. They have like a high definition display and all of that. Like they are very similar machine on many fronts. But one of them is just well integrated because Apple pay attention to like how the hardware works and how the software works and how they both integrate with each other. And they pay attention to that the different applications that are in the whole system have a similar interface so that, you can keep your marks and like they just pay attention that everything in the ecosystem is well integrated together. And if you have an iPhone, you can plug it in and it just works and be integrated with all the applications seamlessly and all of that. Whereas with The Dell machine, you don't have that, right? And well, you know, maybe it's good because actually I have a Dell machine, not a MacBook Pro. But the thing is, Apple is able to sell what is effectively the same machine, right, for 1.5 times the price that Dell is able to sell it. And it's like 98% the same machine, right? But they just like pay attention to detail and integrate everything together, and they have like a unifying driving vision that make that machine happens. And it's clearly like, it's very clear that people are valuing that.
That and the aesthetics, people love them.
Yeah, people love Apple products. And you know, like the Apple machine would be at the same price as the Dell machine. They would have like, you know, 80% of the market, no problem, like no question. Like it's just,
it'd be higher. Yeah, that number would be higher.
Yeah, it's like they can sell with such a premium what is effectively the same machine just because they have this driving vision that they are, you know, they abide by.
Not just
so
making
this is,
little changes here and there with no outcome.
Like this is exceedingly important. This is exceeding. Well, yeah, but all the changes that they do, like kind of fit in the uni of it. Like they have an idea of what the ideal computer should be or should look like, and they are moving toward there. They are not asking themselves, you know, like, oh, you know, like we have this thing with the sound, like where should we, like, you know, what, like, you know, they don't have like all those local problems that they try to solve and find the best solution for all those local problems. And effectively, if you look at Apple products, you can find like plenty of those that are clearly not the optimal solution. I mean, like probably the best example is the first iPhone doesn't even have 3G, right? Where at the time 3G was, you know, it was a thing. It was not,
yes,
it was not like the first iPhone came before 3G. Like every smartphone at the time had 3G, and the first iPhone did not. And everybody at the time was like, what the fuck? You know, like Apple is releasing a product that is a smartphone that doesn't have 3G. They clearly have no idea what they are doing. And yet, you know, like everybody has an iPhone.
Didn't matter.
Yeah, it didn't matter. It didn't matter because they didn't try to be the best at every single thing. They just had that idea of what a smartphone is and how people are going to use a smartphone in 10 years. And they were driving there, right? And even though there are a few pieces of it that were not optimal at every step of the way, like not having 3G in the first iPhone, but the second one had 3G and was better than the first one in many different ways. And they were able to iterate and make it better and, you know, drive the things toward what, you know, what the ideal smartphone is. And the reality is, like most other smartphones now are very similar to iPhones, right? Like they effectively shape that market.
Yeah,
and the products that are not iPhones, they are very, very much inspired from iPhones. So you need that driving vision, and the whole, like, everybody kumbaya decide doesn't give you that, but there is more than that. The reason why everybody decides is no good is that, like, first it's very difficult to decide who decide, and then you get the meta problem, like, you know, it gets recursively abstracted away, but you always get the same problem. But most importantly, what is important is not what people in the ecosystem want. And obviously you're gonna see like many people in the ecosystem yell at me for saying that, but what is important is not what people already in the ecosystem want, because they are already in the ecosystem. You know, it's like you have this very famous anecdote about planes, you know, where so during wartime, obviously, you know, you have planes that are shut down, right? And there was some committee that were, you know, tasked to design, you know, the next iteration of the plane, and they effectively collected data on, you know, part of the plane that were shot when plane came back, and to see, you know, like where the plane would get damaged during battles and stuff like that. And their plan originally was to reinforce the plane where they would get, you know, damaged. But eventually some dude realized that what was important was to reinforce the plane where there was no damage from the plane coming back, right? Because the plane coming back, if they have damage here and there, it's okay because they came back, right? So the damage there is probably not the worst damage possible. But if we have no planes coming back with damage in some other part, it means that, you know, when the plane get damaged here, usually they don't come back. And so this is actually where the data shows that there is no damage that you need to reinforce. It's a bit counterintuitive, but
it's the inverse,
that might end up, you know, like it ended up being the right thing, and the next iteration of the planes, you know, use that philosophy and are much more robust now. And you have a bit of the same problem. Like, you know, we have some people in the ecosystem and they are going to complain about stuff. And the stuff they complain about are roughly like those damage in the plane. But what you can conclude is that those damage are not bad enough. It doesn't mean that they don't matter, right? But they are not bad enough to drive people away, because clearly the people who care about those are still in the ecosystem. So what you need to wonder is what is so bad so that nobody is complaining about, because anyone who care about that is not in the ecosystem.
Yeah, sure.
And you're never gonna get that information by asking people in the ecosystem what to do. Like, it just doesn't inform about that whatsoever. You know, it would be like no company that have experienced explosive growth has done that. Like, Facebook didn't ask Facebook employee what is, like, you know, what is the next thing to improve so that Facebook grow. Actually, I was working on Facebook Grow Japan for like a year. I'm not even Japanese. Like, I'm clearly not the person that know the most about the Japanese market and stuff like that, right? And if you would have asked me, what do you need to do about Facebook, like the Japanese version of Facebook, so that it's more popular to our Japanese user, you would have get only garbage answer, right? Like, there's literally no point.
There's no reason to ask you, yeah.
yeah, there's no reason to ask me. Like, I have zero skill. Well, I have some of those because I've worked a year on it, right? But you can ask like any Japanese person in the street that use Facebook, and you would get higher quality answer than asking me, right? And at the end of the day, the decision we made there is by looking at how Japanese people use Facebook and what problem do they experience, and how can we solve those problems, and then iterate that way, rather than you know, like making, or you know, like trying to have an opinion about what we should do. And we ended up doing like stuff that I would never have thought of. Like, for instance, blood type is like very important in Japan. It's something that, you know, is culturally relevant. People are sharing their blood type. It's like, you know, a social trivia that people like to share. It's very weird, you know, to us that are more of the Western world, because I mean, like, we just don't do that. We don't talk about blood type that much, and we don't share our blood type with our friend. But like, you know, maybe people like something that is similar, but it's actually even bigger than that in Japan. But some people in the West are into astrology, and they're gonna say, oh, you know, I'm like a Sagittarius or whatever, and somehow they think that, you know, it's like an important social trivia. Some people are gonna do that. And blood type in Japan is kind of the same, but it's like, it's more widespread than astrology would be in the West. It's like, it's more important than that. So
culturally, obviously, that's important to them.
Yeah, it's important to them, right? And you would never have guessed, right? So the only way you know that is that you look at Japanese people using social media and what they do with it. And what they do with it is sharing their blood type, or, you know, like one of the things.
Have a module on Facebook that shows on the right, whatever.
Yeah, so you're like, okay, so everybody is sharing their blood type. So maybe you want people to have their blood type in their profile. And so we did that, and it ended up being a widely successful feature. What do they do? Well, there are a lot of earthquakes in Japan, for instance, right? So you see, when there is a earthquake, everybody start posting on Facebook to ask their friend if they're safe, or to tell their friend that they're safe and stuff like that. So you see people doing that. So what do? Well, you create a feature. So there is a disaster feature. I don't know what they call it now. No, it's spread worldwide. It's used. You know, last time it was used, I think it was used in Lebanon when there was this huge explosion in you know, like the harbor. there was this fertilizer explosion.
Yeah.
So when there is some big event like that, there is a feature on Facebook where people can mark themselves safe from whatever event happens. And this was built for the actually my team in Japan built that, because that was incredibly common that people use that feature in Japan, because there are like so many earthquakes and other natural disaster there, much more than there is in other country. So what you do is that you look at what people do with whatever product you have, and you try to make their experience better. You also try to figure out what they try to do but doesn't work. You try to make that experience better. So another example based on Facebook Japan would be Japanese people, they put like their name, their first name and family name, they just like smash them together in one word. And people just know, like what are common first name or family name or whatnot. So they know, like they don't need a space in there because they know which is which. But for the computer, it's just one blob, right? And sometimes people are just gonna search for the first name or just the family name or just the blob, that contains everything. And so now you need to have some kind of logic in there that take the blob and figure out what is the first name and what is the last name in there, so that people can find their friend. And so that's not that easy, right? That's something that is easy for people to do, but that's something that is very difficult for a computer to do. But we see people doing that a lot. We see the match for the search for people on Facebook being way lower in Japan than in other country. And so we are like, okay, we need to fix this, right? Because if people cannot find other people on Facebook, it's obviously not going to be very interesting for them to use the product. So you need to go there, but then you have the next level, right? Because Japanese people use different writing system. They use kanji that are similar to the Chinese writing system, where each character is effectively an ID, right? It can be a noun, a verb, or whatever. Like each character is an ID. And they have hiragana and katakana, which are phonetic writing. Kind of like, the Roman alphabet. It works differently because it works by syllabs. But the idea is similar. Like you have a set of characters, and from that set of characters, you can deduce how something is pronounced. The problem is that there is no mapping between the two, because one is IDs and one is pronunciation based. And so there is no connection between the two, and people use the two interchangeably. So we ended up using, like what is fairly basic, but at the time it was like almost 10 years ago now. So it was, we ended up using machine learning to learn all the Japanese name and or their pronouns based on their kanji, or based on the pronunciation, or you retrieve what kanji it's likely to be, and what is a first name and what is a family name and all of that. And we would run that through some machine learning stuff that would try to make a best guess on what is the name and family name of people. But all of that by observing what people are doing with the stuff and by having a vision of where you want to bring the product. Not by asking people that are already using the product what did, if there was a poll among all Facebook users, none of that shit would have come up, right? It's just not what would have happened. Because first, most people are not Japanese. And actually at the time, Facebook was not performing that well in Japan, because we were not good at doing all those stuff that are important for the Japanese market. And so if we have as Facebook users, Japanese people would have been underrepresented in that sample. And so the problem in Japan would have been underrepresented in the results.
Probably made it worse.
Yeah, it would probably made everything worse, right? We would have overfit the product to existing user, and growth would have stopped. And this is actually what we see in BCH, if we're honest about it. We had explosive growth in the early day, because in the early day it was very much vision driven. Now everybody must have their say about everything, and the growth has dramatically decreased, because we are not focused, like we are focused asking ourselves what everybody wants, and if everybody's will has been taken into account, and yada yada yada, rather than driving the vision in a non-compromising way, which is what will lead to growth. And I'd say like the last thing, and maybe probably the most important, but maybe it's a bit of a restating of what has been said, but there is this quote that actually doesn't exist, I think, or people are not sure if he actually said that or not, but there's this quote from Ford, who, according to some people, supposedly said that if he asked what people wanted, they would have asked him for faster horses, right? Faster horses. And obviously Ford is very well known to build cars. Like it was, Ford was one of the first car company to do mass market cars. Right? They tried to do car that were way cheaper than other car and that everybody could buy effectively. Before Ford, car was very much a luxury product. And they were like, okay, the vision of Ford was that in the next few years, everybody is going to drive a car. Almost everybody is going to drive a car. And if you take back yourself at the time, it seems crazy, right? Because you don't have gas station everywhere, right? So you're like, everybody's going to buy a car, and then what? They're not going to be oil in the road for them to refuel their car, so it's going to be very inconvenient, and you're like, it seems kind of crazy, you know. It seems kind of like buying an iPhone that doesn't have 3G, you know, or maybe buying a Tesla now, you know. You're like, oh, you know, like recharging the car is too long, and there is not as much charging station as gas station. But if you project yourself like 10 years, 15 years in the future, you're like, okay, what needs to happen for that stuff to become ubiquitous? And you see Tesla doing that, and this is why they're deploying their charging station like everywhere by themselves. You ask yourself, like, where do you think this thing is going? And Ford did the same. It was like, you know, those ore stuff that everybody is using right now, we can outcompete this by like we can make something that is an order of magnitude better. And we're going to make the bet that the infrastructure is going to follow, because there is money to be made selling oil to car owners if there are a lot more car owners. So we can trust that, you know, the market is going to do its thing. And effectively, this is what Ford did. This kind of stuff, you don't get it from people, because people are not car specialists or specialists. You know, they are users. And so they know what their problem is. But usually they're going to phrase their problem in terms of a solution instead of stating their problem. So when people say, we want faster horses, what they tell you is that they want to go from A to B faster. And this is the problem that you need to solve. They actually don't really care about horses. Horses is just the solution that they have right now. And so they have a solution right now, and they have a problem. And so what is like the simplest way to adapt the current solution that they have to the problem that they have? You know, like what knob do you need to tweak? Well, you need the horse to be faster, right? But effectively, it's not that easy to do a faster horse. Because horses, you know, like you can still try to breed them to make them faster or whatnot, but then probably they would be like higher maintenance or whatnot. And plus, you know, you can only do that so much. Like you can get maybe a horse that is 1.5 times faster. You won't get a horse that, you know, runs, you know, like 300 miles an hour, like a bullet train. It's just not gonna happen. And so when people tell you they want X, what you need to do if you want to make a successful product is not do X. Or like sometimes you're gonna do X, you know, but you don't want to rush into doing X. What you want to do is that, okay, my users tell me that they want X. What is the problem that X solve? Right? This is the first question that you want to ask yourself. Once you've defined that problem, you just forget about X. You forget about X and you search what is the best solution to the problem. And you do that. And sometimes it's going to be X, you know, sometimes it's going to be X, but very often it's just not going to be X. And you should not expect that, you know, you should not expect the solution to be X that often, because you know way more than they do about solving this kind of problem because this is your job. This is what you do every day. And this is not what they do every day, right? And so as a result, you should be able to come up with better solutions than they do by themselves. And if you don't, then you're probably not very good at what you're doing, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I feel like we need to be like a roadmap, set it out, move forward with it. Anything else is just a waste of time.
Yeah, well, unless we, notice something catastrophic that needs to be addressed, but otherwise, one of the features that we want is store of value. And I think it's not emphasis enough in the BCH ecosystem. And I think, the price is telling us that. So we need to be listening to that. And at the store of value part of it needs to be predictable in the future. And so every time you say, I have solution blah that is better than what is on the roadmap for XYZ reason, the trade-off that you are making by even considering going there, like not even implementing it, but just considering going there, the trade-off that you're making is that you're degrading the store of value properties of it. And so you need to be pretty damn sure that what you are pushing for is not something that is like 5% better or just make a slightly different trade-off. It needs to be something that is significantly better so that you offset the cost in terms of store value properties. And I think this is not understood. This is not understood, and this is why you see so many debates about, should we do Avalanche or should we do Storm? Well, first Avalanche is actually superior to Storm in like pretty much every metric that you can think of. But beside that, like even assuming that there was something in Storm that, it was like somewhat better than Avalanche, it could finalize stuff in like, 10% faster than Avalanche can or whatnot. Well, this is just not good enough to start a great debate about that. And the reason is that it creates a situation where you don't know if in 5 years BCH is going to have Avalanche or BCH is going to have Storm or BCH is going to have something else. And the fact that you don't know that is degrading the store of value properties of BCH.
It's like taking, the fact that you don't know what's going to happen down the line and cause uncertainty now because you don't know that later on.
Yeah, and uncertainty must be priced in. Like if like we forget about crypto, you're just an investor and you want to put your money into something and you have those two products. And one of them is like, we think it's going to have like, that many percent return, say 10% return year over year. And like here is what is going to happen in the next 10 years, and it's all well laid out. And you have this other one, they also tell you, this is going to have like 10% return year over year, except we have no idea what we're going to do over the next 10 years, and we're still debating it, right? Like which one of them will you put your money in? It's a very easy choice if you like frame it that way. And we don't need to know anything about the financial product or, like it's not even a crypto question. It's just an investment question. When there is a higher risk, you need a higher return to offset that, right? So maybe, like there is this other product, but it's more speculative. People are not actually sure what they're going to do in the next 10 years. But the expected return now is like 25% year over year instead of 10%. Then you'll be like, maybe I'm going to put some of my money in there, but not all of it, right? Like I'm still going to put a fair amount of money in the 10% one because I don't want to end up broke. And so we need to work at reducing that risk factor. The problem is that the incentive that we have right now in the BCH space are the exact opposite. Because, well, we talked about that briefly, right? But because effectively we reward mostly in terms of attention, right? And even when there is like monetary reward, it's often based on donations, stuff like Flipstarter, for instance. And if you want your swift answer to be well funded, you need visibility, right? So you're effectively converting visibility into money when you do something like Flipsat. So you need visibility to begin with, and the best way to get visibility is just by doing flashy stuff that will impact the roadmap, like doing just like boring work day after day that is not very visible but keeps things running stable and everything. It's just not what gets you visibility. And so because of that, we're effectively incentivizing risk for investor, which is like exactly the opposite of what you want to do. And I think the market price reflects that, right? The market price is definitively reflecting that.
Seeing the price fluctuate because of the infighting, like that's no doubt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like you get to realize most people doing that infighting, they have an ideological things that they want to do on all sides, right? Like it's just like I'm not just blaming one side over another here, but there is this ideological idea, right? But if this project is going to be successful, it needs to appeal to people that are not ideological, right? We cannot have like 20 libertarian that use that and call it a success. It's just not it's not how it is. Plus, how libertarians are. They're just going to find that teeny difference deep down in their ideology, that
I don't think we have the numbers for it.
They're gonna fight themselves over it, which is okay. Like if you want, those are usually interesting debates, but it doesn't make for a mass market product.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough. You need the bigger audience. You don't just need libertarians.
You need the bigger audience, and the bigger audience, you don't get it by just berating them. You cannot lie. If you want the bigger audience, you cannot lie. What you need to do is actually provide them value.
Yeah, give them an incentive.
Not just provide value, actually. You need to provide so much value that they're going to switch from whatever they have now to whatever you're proposing. And switching as a cost, right? Like you have your habits, your stuff that you do, switching that as a cost. Maybe not monetary. Sometimes it's monetary, but like even a cognitive cost. I need to learn something else. It's gonna take me time. My time is valuable. I could be doing something else. I could be like taking care of my kids. I could be like playing music. I can be with my friend at the bar. I can can just do something else with that time. So there is an opportunity cost there. Even if it's not I need to pay to move to that other stuff. Just the fact that I need to learn about the fact that there is that other stuff. I need to learn how different it is from the stuff that I have right now. I need to, project myself into the future to know if it's better for me or not, and make the choice and take the risk and, weigh the pro and cons of the risk I'm taking by switching to the other stuff. It's just like all that stuff is going to take my mental energy and bandwidth. And so there is definitively a cost of switching. And so you need to do something that is not just better, but that is so much better that it's worth people to pay that cost of switching.
Yeah, I think
there's literally no other thing. Like I see libertarian all the time that are like, oh, have you read this book by Mrs. Human Action, or have you read like whatever or whatnot? And it's just like you're not convinced. You're not gonna convince a large group of people that your economic ideas are right or whatnot. Like even if from a purely factual perspective you're right, it's just like not rational to expect people to read the 600-page book to just understand your perspective. It's just not gonna happen. Like the cost you are putting on them is so stupidly high, and usually people don't see it, I assume, because for them it's very interesting. Like most libertarians are usually interested in economics and stuff like that, and so they are happily gonna read a few 100-page book on economics because it's so interesting to them. So it's not even a cost for them, right? But most people are not that interested in economics, and you have the same in every domain, right? Like if you ask a mathematician about like whatever question, they can probably give you some reference to crazy book that nobody would read if they are not a mathematician, right? Because they are very obtuse, they cover all the detail. But for a mathematician, that's a very interesting book, right? But for you, that would be like a very long and grueling experience to go through that book. So you would have to have someone that is like more interested in the topic to break it down to you in some way that is more palpable. And you have people like, I'd say like 3 Blue 1 Brown, for instance, is doing a fantastic job at doing this kind of stuff. There are like many people, like we live in an age where there are many people willing to do that. In economics, I don't know, there is the marginal university guys like Alex Tabarrok and what's the name of the other one? Okay, it's not coming back to me right now, but there is the marginal university guys, for instance. They have a very interesting playlist on economics. Those people are good because those people are the one advancing our cause effectively. Like you need to lower the cost more and more to learn more about something, or even better, you need to make it profitable to learn more about something, because then you are gonna get a lot more people learning. Like, you know, if you're like, well, I'm gonna pay you to learn about this math problem. Well, suddenly, you know, maybe you're gonna read this few 100-page book that is, you know, like great book for mathematical people, but, you know, not for other people.
For a lot of people, cryptocurrency doesn't solve any problem. And I see that every day when I speak to my friends. Some are interested, most aren't. So I feel like we need to.
Well, I think it can solve some of the problem, but the flip side of that is that the experience is not seamless enough, right? And as a result, the cost of switching is actually higher than whatever value is provided for many people. So that's very true. There are some use cases where we do significantly better, but maybe most people in the West are not comfortable to that. But like effectively cross-border transfer, for instance, things like remittances.
I had this just yesterday. My girlfriend was trying to send some money to someone in Mexico that she went on a tour last year. Same thing, but Bitcoin would solve that.
Yeah. So that is a problem with banks. That is pretty bad. But the thing is, all those problems, they also exist within a country, and this is why banks have so much fees and stuff like that. But the system is pretty good at abstracting those problems and routing around them and not exposing the user to them too much, right? And so as a result, like, you know, for instance, there are chargebacks for credit cards, and obviously this is a problem in the system. And but how often as a credit card user do you need to worry about chargebacks? Like never. Merchants need to worry about them sometime, but usually what happens is that they have an insurance or and something like that. So effectively, you are paying for it, right? Because it costs money for the merchant to accept that.
The fees that we pay go towards insurance.
Yeah, but it's completely abstracted to you. Like, you have a problem here that you're paying for limitation of the system, but it's not even a line in your credit card tickets or anything, you know, like insurance against
it's already factored in, yeah.
Against, like, it's all factored in and it's all seamless, right? It just works. And like people in the US have kind of like retarded credit card system, I'd say. I've lived there for a while, and, you know, like a lot of stuff still work with money to strip, and you need to sign and all of that. And that process is quite annoying, but most of the world right now has, you know, contactless credit card that works with NFC. And usually, like, you know, usually the contactless stuff is like for small amounts. So in France, typically it's like up to 30 euro or sometimes 50 euro. It depends on the shop. If it's a small amount, like 30 euro or less, you can just like put your card on the card reader, and, you know, it bleeps and you know, the cashier gives you a ticket, and that's it. You know, like, there's just nothing more to do. If this is a higher amount, you're gonna need to put your card in and type your PIN, because, you know, you want more security for higher amount of money. But even that, you know, is not very constraining. The whole process takes, you know, maybe less than 10 seconds. this is a really good experience, and this is an experience that have a lot of problems. But if you're like, if you need to explain to people, listen, there is this problem with chargeback for merchant, and so merchant, they need to take an insurance, and therefore the price of your product is higher. And if everybody would be switching to that also solution, then they wouldn't be charged back, and so you would like pay a few % less on average on your purchases. It's just like it's impossible to sell, right? Because those problems are very well abstracted away from people. The gain is fairly marginal. So you have this concept in economics where the benefit is very concentrated, but the gain is very diffuse. You get very skewed economic. And it happens for the typical example is corn subsidized in the US. That is in every economic book. So corn subsidized in the US cost a shit ton of money to American, like an absurd amount. I don't remember, what is the exact amount, but it's a lot of money. But it's spread over all Americans, right? So even if it's like billions of dollars, there is 300 million American or so. So say it's like $10 billion, it's gonna be like $30 per American per year, something like that, right? Which is still probably not something that you'd want to pay. I mean, it makes no sense that you pay $30 a year to subsidize someone else's business, but $30 a year is just not enough for you to start a campaign about that and start, like trying to build the lobby and start to get the law changed and stuff. Like, this is a high energy, high time, high work endeavor to get involved into politics and get that changed. And that cost is going to be way higher than $30, right? So your expected gain from that is just, not there. And so most people are not going to do it. On the other hand, you have people that receive those subsidies, and those people, they receive billions of dollars, right? And so for them, it's very much worse, taking part of the process, the decision-making, keeping the subsidies going, or even increase it. And so even though like the cost on one side and the benefit on the other side is the same, you don't see both sides equally involved in that issue, because one side, because the cost on one side is diffused. So you're gonna have the same problem with credit card chargebacks, for instance. The cost of that is diffused, right? The cost of that is that everybody that uses a credit card, which is almost everybody, is gonna pay a few % more. And actually, also people are gonna pay a few % more as well, because typically the price is the same whether you pay by credit card or cash in most, in most places. And so even if you don't use credit card, you end up paying for that, right? So the cost is like diffused to the max. Everybody is paying for it. And everybody is paying like, percents, like not that much. And so this is not something you're gonna get people riled up about, right? A better target is the merchant themselves in that, if you look at that specific encode, because then they pay the insurance in bulk at once, right? So like you can save that much on your insurance by accepting that payment method instead. So they have more concentrated costs, so they are more convincible. But this whole idea that we're gonna preach to the world and preach and preach and preach again, and it's gonna work. No, it's gonna work on the people who are interested by this kind of question, because for those people, learning about this kind of question is interesting in itself. And so they're gonna be willing to do it. But this is not a your rich Mars market. Like people have other shit to do than learning about how chargeback works. It's just, and we are all the same. What is very funny is that we are all the same, right? Because people who are interested by that stuff, they just don't know how their car works, and they bring it to the mechanics to repair it, right? They just don't want to learn about it, right? Yeah. Or plumbing in your house or whatever, right? But there is some dude somewhere that is really into cars, that know everything about all the cars, what what are the specificity of each, and or you fix them when you have a problem. And that guy never got to the mechanics because he knows that he can do a better job himself.
Yeah, for sure.
Even me, doesn't care about his car the way he care about his car.
I know about cars, but I still wouldn't attempt to do my brakes. Like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, but like the point is, the guys that is like the dude that is really, well, you're a bit of an, like you're kind of like breaking my analogy here because
sorry,
because you're interested by both, but my point, like the dude that is really into car is probably not really into economic policies and understanding how the whole incentive of the stuff works. And there is a dude that is into plumbing, and there is a dude that is into woodworking, and there's like people that are interested in a bunch of stuff, and they're gonna be willing to put the hour into like whatever is their thing, and they're gonna read books about it and watch video and practice it, for hours every weekend, no problem, right? But they're just not gonna do that to learn whatever you want them to learn. For that to happen, you need to provide them value and abstract that complexity in some way.
Thank you for your time, Amaury. I've definitely learned something today, and I really appreciate you breaking down the network upgrade for me and also others. Thanks again.
Well, same wise. That was a nice chat.
Take it easy, Amaury.
Ciao, ciao.